G'day ladies and gentlemen, my name is Zach and welcome back to Printed. Today we're going to be diving headfirst into the wonderful world of Turnip28. I've been keeping an eye on Turnip28 since the Kickstarter released a couple years ago and have been absolutely in love with the amazing characterful world that Max Fitzgerald has created. For those of you that are uninitiated, Turnip28 revolves around a Napoleonic alternate apocalyptic history that features a bunch of root vegetables taking over the forms of various different living organisms. The best part about the game is it has actually been around for a little while now and is currently in its 17th reiteration of the rules and is constantly receiving amazing free updates from a very, very passionate creator. I fell in love with the universe as a whole due to its unique and fun setting. There's heaps of different factions, fully fleshed out lore, and if you'd like to check them out for yourselves, I'm actually going to leave a link to the PDF instructions down below. So if you want to jump in with it and try yourself, make sure to grab those. With all the rules and lore being easily accessible, it's very, very easy to jump into the world of Turnip28 and start your very own army. Since the game is miniature agnostic, it's super simple to get in. You can literally use whatever models you want, whether it be Warhammer, some garden ornaments, or just random junk that you've found in your backyard. You can put it all together, start an army, and then using the free rules, jump straight into a game. It's so fun and refreshing in that sense. You can also go as far as kitbashing your own stuff, which is something that I'm going to be doing today. Turnip28 basically allows for full creative liberty, and it's really interesting to see a game that just does not care about the models that you use. And I'm really excited to jump into what we're going to be doing today. If you are someone who is a little bit more by the book, I definitely recommend checking out Max's My Mini Factory page. He has a bunch of not only free models, but also paid models that you can buy, and kitbash something that's a little bit more closer to what's kind of lore specific. You can also choose to take these 3D printed bits and kitbash them with other things like the Napoleonic 28mm kits that certain companies make, or just take it from another 28mm kit of a historic period that you enjoy and then slap them all onto that. I'm very fortunate enough to have a bunch of 3D printers, so today instead of going for the kitbash and the kit option, I'm going to be going for the fully 3D printed route. So I decided to grab these Phish model from Max's store and combine them with some of the models that were graciously sent to me from Michael from Earth's Treehouse. These guys have designed some amazing models for their Horrors of the D&D campaign, and I am super excited to feature them in today's video. If you'd like to check them out for yourself and see what else they're doing, I'll leave a link to their stuff down below, so make sure to check them out and tell them that I sent. Although this video isn't sponsored by them in any means, Mike has graciously sent these models at no extra cost and has been very patient while I make this video in amongst all the delays and everything. So a massive shout out to him for that. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the printing and we'll see how I kitbash these models. With all the files in hand, it's time to go ahead and get them printing. I'm loading all of these guys up on my trusty Saturn 3 Ultras using my high toughness Sunly resin. Luckily for me, Mike has included some pre-supported files, so I don't have to fuss around with supporting them myself. I set them off and just had to wait a few hours to see how they printed up. The first set of midis printed up beautifully with only one minor fail on the diver's helmet. Unfortunately, when I opened up the enclosure on the second batch to see how they had gone, I noticed quite a few fails, which after investigating seemed to be an issue with the pre-supports. I did also mention these to Mike and he assured me that they'd fix any of his issues and make sure that the changes that were necessary were done. I will admit it's super cool to see that they're very passionate about the models that they create and that Mike is willing to take on this feedback and improve them. Now with all that said and done, it's time to wash these fishy friends. I threw them all in my wash and cure station. Now I don't personally use IPA or anything expensive like that. I just use straight methylated spirits, which is super cheap and basically does as good a job as IPA. It just dries maybe a little bit slower. As you can see, the models that were successful came out beautifully, and I'm genuinely happy with the level of detail here. In a world full of 3D printing Patreons shoving their models full of excess details, it's super refreshing to see some models with a slightly more stylized look, and just enough detail to get the point across. As you can see, there are some really cool models in this pack that they have created, and they've included some awesome terrain pieces to go alongside everything. At this point, I was actually getting really excited for the conversion work. Now for this project, I've decided to take full advantage of the free Phish gang up on Turnip28's My Mini Factory. Since the entire gang is completely free, I chose to print up every single bit and just give myself a bunch of different options when it came to the conversion work. Every Turnip28 army has a basic composition that they all follow. In this world, the leaders of said factions are called Snobs. For mine, I knew I wanted to create something using the massive Barracuda model that was included, so I thought I may as well kitbash a little fish riding a fish. This would help it stand out significantly on the tabletop and make for a fantastic centerpiece. I test fitted the models together so that I could get a good idea of where I wanted everything to sit. I had to make some small trims using my clippers to take back all of these spines off. Then, using some super glue, I positioned the Snob right on the top near the head there. I wanted to look like this guy is controlling the Barracuda. I fully assembled him, then used some jeweler's chain to create something for him to hold on to. It was a bit fiddly to get it to stay, but after a lot of super glue and a heap of accelerator, and a little bit of patience, I got it to a position that I was fully happy with. I did also decide to add this cool top hat to him so that people would know that he means business. Now I had to try and figure out how to attach him to the actual base itself. Luckily enough, there were a heap of terrain pieces that I could cobble together and create a mount for this mount. I clipped away the seaweed parts and then was on to the next step. There were some weird gaps between the base and the rock, so I grabbed my trusty miller pot and after a bunch of mixing, I pushed it into all the biggest gaps. I did also try to sculpt it to look like a nice rocky outcropping, and just like every time I used modeling putty, I was left with a bunch of excess. So, scratching my brain, I decided to get creative and make some rocks to help the base seem a little bit more interesting, and just help tie everything together. I quickly glued the Snob and his beautiful steed to the base, then attached the anchor that we had clipped off before, and it was on to the next steps. To help all of this blend together, I did grab some Vallejo texture paste. This helps create a unified texture over the entire base and stops all the flat areas from looking boring, because naturally you're not going to find a perfectly flat area. I did quickly come back and add this little goldfish child running away. I just think it looks really funny and adds a little bit of extra interest to the base. Next up, I wanted to use this awesome sea holder model as the base of a 50-pounder cannon. I basically got all the pieces I needed from this empty bottle of superglue accelerator. I started by tearing out the inner bits and then using the nozzle as a barrel. I did also notice that there was a little bit of support material left on the model, so I just went around and cleaned that up. And then went to town on it with a bunch of green stuff. Which, can I add, was an absolute nightmare to mix. If you have any tips that would help making epoxy mixing easier, I would love to know your suggestions in the comments down below. I super duper struggle with trying to get this mixed properly, so any sort of tips would help me out immensely. Now, I did actually accidentally break the eye cannon off, but then realized that it would be much easier to build it off. Now, I did actually break the cannon off the top of the model, and then realized that it's going to be much easier to sculpt the green stuff if I just shove it on the bottom and then smush it into the front of the face. I figured that most beholders are somewhat telekinetic, so taking the eye set probably wouldn't affect his aim too much. To get everything nicely pushed in, I just used the back end of my paintbrush to push it all around and get it exactly to a point that I was happy with. I did also add these little fish guys to the base because every good cannon needs a good crew, as well as figured that the best ammunition is obviously small goldfish children. These guys are English influenced anyway, so I figured that the best ammunition is most likely a child. Off camera, I did build these fish some friends. I stuck them to a piece of cardboard next with some double-sided tape, and then went outside to give them all a good prime. For these, I started out simply with a can of matte black spray paint. Unfortunately, during the priming, I lost one of the bigger guys, who tried his best to swim towards the nearest train, in pieces. After I wrangled up all the broken pieces, I then gave a heavy zenithal of white from the top. Doing so lets me see the details a lot better and allows me to make some of the transparent paints do most of the work later down in the track. To get the proverbial ball rolling, I did 2 test models, which actually turned out better than I thought, but wasn't quite what I wanted the army to look like. So I went back to the drawing board and racked my brain. I wanted to have the opportunity to use some fun and really cool patterns, so I actually took inspiration from the vibrant and colourful Better Phish. I actually used to keep these guys back in the day, and took inspiration directly from my old boy Mordecai that I used to have. He featured these amazing and intricate red, blue, and black patterns that I thought would look absolutely adorable on these fish models. The smaller fish lads would make the perfect canvas for a second batch of test models, now that I know what I'm going for. I started by getting the largest parts of the models done first. I grabbed some Tenderloss Red from scale 75 and just applied this to all of the skirting. Next up was some Vallejo Air Black, and I put this over all the gloves, shirts, and eye areas. I did also freehand some rings on his hat because any fish worth their metal has a fancy hat with even fancier patterns. Now, unfortunately, I did run out of Rakarth flesh because, curse these GW bottles, it all dried out. Luckily enough, during my time painting, I have found that you can make your very own Rakarth flesh from 2 simple paints. All you're going to need is to grab some model color burnt umber and pale sand. Now, you want to mix these at roughly a 50-50 ratio. From what I can tell, this is nearly, if not an exact match to Rakarth flesh, and fortunately my new go-to mix. Best part about it is it costs half the price of a normal GW pot. I took this mix and added it over all the skin areas. I did wait for this base coat to fully dry before moving on to the next step. Then, using a combination of black, blue and red, I sketched out a bunch of different patterns all over the skin areas. There wasn't actually a real plan to where I would add each of these, so I basically just had fun with it and put colors wherever I felt like they should be. With that, 90% of the model was done and dusted. So I decided to move on to the silver areas next. I picked them all out with some lead belcher, the absolute goat of metallic paints. Now, for the next step, I frickin' suck at painting leather. But luckily, Games Workshop developed the skill in a bottle that is snakebite leather. I put this over all the shoe coverings and then just let it completely dry. Now, I'm actually really happy with how these little lads turned out, and figured I'd tackle the Snob next. I pretty much copied my test scheme one for one for the big guy and had a lot of fun picking out all the details. For this gang, I did sort of create my own little headcanon and backstory for them. I noticed that when building a lot of these models, that some of their weapons and defensive things were all different kinds of fish. This gave me a ton of different ideas, and I thought it would be really cool to have them as a source of living metal. Since these guys come from a mostly water and dense urban cities, instead of having them mine for metal deep underground, they instead harvest their metals from an alternative source, the ocean. Most non-fish fish are actually covered in a hard metallic scales that can be harvested, melted down, and turned into various paraphernalia. I thought it'd be really cool to have them use the local fauna to create their weapons, armor, buildings, and anything else metallic. I think it's really cool to create a super unique and abundant ecosystem where they would basically have a near infinite source of metals, which inspired my paint job for this massive beast that my Snob is riding. The Snob painted up really nicely and quickly, which meant it was time to tackle his magnificent fishy beast. I started out by putting lead belch over all of its body, then moved in with some burnt umber to base coat all of the teeth and bone areas. I took a brief break and decided to quickly paint the little goldfish kid on the base. I start with a Troll Slayer orange for the flesh, then go some Uriel yellow for his cute little gumboots, and finishing off the eyes and hat with some black paint. Using the same black paint, I did also pick out the entire base next. Then, moving in with some Dawnstone, I applied it over all of the rocks. I actually did this while both paints were wet so I could easily blend them together for a nice, smoother finish. Next up, just using some more Tenderloss red, I applied it over all the coral as a nice little accent color. I did also come back with a pale sand from earlier and pick out the upper areas of the teeth, making sure to keep some of the brown in the recesses and only applying it to the top third of each tooth. This just helps its pearly whites stand out nicely. I did also use the same paint to highlight its ribs. I wanted to continue the freehanding and decided to go for a really cool koi-inspired look for this awesome barracuda. This was super simple to do. Basically, I just went around the entire body with some Troll Slayer orange and painted random blobs wherever I felt like it. Now, with that step done and dusted, it was time to get the models varnished in preparation for an oil wash. I like to go for a glossy varnish because it allows the oil wash to flow nicely into all the recesses and removes way easier than anything else. I actually let this dry overnight, which usually isn't the best option since it becomes a lot harder to remove, but using some Artist White Spirit and a heap of cotton buds, I gently rubbed the wash away from the upper highlights and any areas that I wanted to keep in the bright. This helps all the colors blend together nicely and basically does 90% of the detail work for us. I did also repeat this step on the little models from the beginning of the video as well. Now, as you can see, the model has a heap of depth in it and it's really helped bring some contrast in. Now, with all my Turnip28 models, I like to add a bunch of extra effects and things to make it look a little bit more grimdark and worn. This is usually a super simple process and only requires 2 paints. Just make sure to put them in warm water, not boiling water, because if you put them in boiling water, they will expand and you will not be able to put them down nicely. It happened to me, it's very annoying. Then I made sure to give everything a really good shake, making sure to mix the thick sediment at the bottom all the way through the paint. Next up, I apply this to any areas that I want to get dirtied down. No pun intended. I mostly focus this on areas where the water and grime would naturally accumulate, but you can go to town with it and apply it everywhere if you really wanted to. I just come back in with a crappy brush dipped in water and blend them out into the subsequent areas around them. With that final step done and dusted, it's time for a grand reveal. I'm really happy with how this model turned out, but you may have noticed that I haven't actually done anything with a 50-pounder Canon. So if you'd like to see me paint that up in a dedicated video, make sure to leave a comment down below. I think the best part about Turnip28 is the fact that you can have a lot of fun with the paint jobs and really explore a bunch of different methods. The creative possibilities are genuinely endless. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. It has been such a pleasure kitbashing all these models, and another huge shout out to Mike for graciously sending these models to me. I really appreciate you for taking a chance and allowing me to have a little bit of fun and creative liberties with this. I really appreciate it. So if you did indeed enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it. And if I haven't seen your face around here before, I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button and join our amazing community of hobby heroes. We grow every single day, and I would love to see your friendly face there. So until next time, everyone, happy hobbying, and I'll catch you later. Bye.